As Adam said, my name is Owens. I'm a Bezlio developer here at SaberLogic. I work on the front end, the back end, our apps, really anything related to Bezlio right now. So today I'm going to go through our custom designer and some debugging techniques, kind of getting you to the point after Kurt's presentation, kind of showing you how to build what Kurt has built. Nothing will be as advanced as he has built today, but you can easily spend a couple hours on this custom designer and still have plenty of time to talk about it. So you guys can follow along if you want using the demo accounts. I'm not doing anything too advanced, just kind of going through the various features of a custom designer. There will be no PowerPoint as well, so hopefully that helps. The first step here is to just get to our custom designer. You can do that using this gears icon on our bezels page. Is it taking a while? Let's see. Is it very delayed? Oh, yeah. It might be best if I hop on. Yeah, let me try to hop on over there and go from there. Maybe. There we go, stuff here. Let me log out. There. Okay, like I was saying before, to get to our custom builder here, just kind of go through our bezels page and create a bezel. And it's going to be the last tab here in our select a bezel. Now, like I said before, I do work on some of the bezels and apps we publish, and every time I start to develop one of those apps, I do start here in this custom builder. We can edit and, I guess, develop any of those apps that we have published using this custom builder. There is, the sky's the limit in this thing. It's straight JavaScript and HTML. Like I said, we'll just go through some of the easy stuff first, just to kind of get your foot wet. The custom builder here is really just comprised of two things. We have an editor on the right here, and then on the left we kind of have a folder structure. This folder structure is the basics of any bezel. Starting with a variable. A variable is anything is like a container to hold a value. Now, that value can be anything from a number, a string, a Boolean, or an object. To add a variable here, you'll right. We'll just have test to start, and you can edit that also by right-clicking. So here is the variable editor. There are a few drag and drop items up here. So say if you wanted a string, you can just drag a string in and use that string. To start, we'll just use a string and say hello world. We'll verify and save that as well. Verifying really just makes sure it compiles correctly. So if we want to just display that value of that variable, we can go to these snippets. These snippets are just various chunks of code or HTML markup kind of to help you develop bezels. We're always adding to these snippets, and we'll always continue to add to these snippets. So we'll go to our markup folder here. and find our raw data view. We can drag and drop anything in this folder structure, including variables, data descriptions, and functions. To start here, we'll just drag in our variable test. Now, Adam briefly mentioned before about these curly braces. Not to go too in-depth with it, but they're just called interpolation, and really it just tells the compiler to interpret the value of that variable and not use the text there. So we can preview this, and as you can see, in a small bubble, it will just display the value of that variable. Now, like I said before, these variables can be as complex as you want, and we use objects a lot in Bezlio. Everything we do really is an object. So an object is a list of properties for anything. An example is an apple. So you can have a property called type, which would be an apple, a property called color, which could be red, and like a price property, say $1. Now I do have just a cheat sheet here if you guys are following along. Nothing too advanced, but just to make it simple here, I'm just going to copy in this object. So like I said before, this is a simple object relating to an apple. So our type is apple, color red, price is 1. We can verify, save and close, and just like before, we don't have to change anything in the markup and preview that, and it'll display that object. Now, when I'm first developing a bezel or an app, my first goal is to get the object or the data description I want and kind of show it in this way to see which properties I want to reference and which properties I want to use. Now, as you've seen before, these objects can be extremely long and extremely complex. Right now, I'm just using a simple one just for the ease of it. But they're all listed in this way. Now, to kind of expand on this variable aspect here, are arrays. An array is just a group of variables under one name. So we'll remove this and just have a simple string array. An array is prefaced by square brackets and separated by commas. So every variable is separated by a comma. Like before, verify close, and it is displayed very similar to an object. Now, we use a lot of object arrays in Bezlio, and that's what usually data descriptions come back as. Now, a data description really is just a variable, but its value is filled using an outside source, kind of like a SQL statement, whatever that returns, or an Excel file. For this example, we'll just use a simple Excel file. So same thing as variables. You can add a data description, rename it, and edit it as well. Now, when you add a data description through this folder structure, it kind of brings you back to this familiar builder. You can find this builder in a lot of our templates. So we can choose our provider and choose our connection. We only have one right now. Our resource, we have a whole list of them, but really we'll just use the Excel plugin today since it's the simple one. Our method would be get data. In that full path of the file, we do have a path name here, if you are following along. This is very similar to what Adam was showing with some of the templates he did earlier. Sheet name, we just have one sheet, and first row columns. When we verify it here, it'll actually go out and get that data and return it. Kind of give you an example. It'll return all the data and it'll display it here for you. For this example, I just have a Excel file called fruit with 3 different fruits and 3 different properties per fruit. Very simple, very basic, but it gets the idea across. From here, we can save and close. Now, just like variables, we can display this data description with this raw data viewer. Drag and drop as well, and preview. Now, as you notice, it's not immediately there because it'll have to go out there and get that data. It doesn't take long, but it does take a second. Now, that kind of brings us to the next point, is functions. Now, functions are like mini programs for the overall bezel. Every bezel starts with two basic functions, ng-on-init and onDataChange. ng-on-init runs every time the bezel first starts, and onDataChange runs anytime any data is returned to that bezel using any of these data descriptions. Originally, ng-on-init is blank, while onDataChange has a simple line of code. So since it kind of takes a second here to get this data, we use a lot of loading animations to kind of show the user that it's still processing and not to expect that data instantaneously. So here I'll show you how to get something simple going here. So when we can come down to this markup area, and there's actually a loading snippet here. We can drag and drop that into the editor. And it will actually populate a variable called loading, which it references in the markup. Now, if we click on that loading, it's originally set to false. So we'll keep that set to false right now, and in ng-on-init, we'll actually come in here and drag and drop that variable and set it to true. So every time this bezel starts up, it will set that variable to true and initiate that loading animation. And on onDataChange, we need a way to signify we need a way to stop that loading animation when that data description comes back and it has results. So we can come down to our snippets and to our code folder, and there's an if statement. In that if statement, it'll kind of give you an example condition and value. However, we can actually just drag in that data sub, and if that data sub does have any value associated with it, it will execute the line of code. So in here, we can actually turn off our loading variable and set it to false. So when we preview this, there should be a loading animation waiting for the data return. And when the data does return, it does turn off that loading animation. Now, with data descriptions, you can have as many as you want. Some of our bezels have up to 10 data descriptions, and you can have many more. So there's a different way to add these data descriptions as well. Let's have a button to call another data description. We can drag and drop a standard button. Get a new line first. We could drag and drop a standard button here, and it'll actually add a new function called onButtonClick. Now, in that onButtonClick function, we have a snippet that we can drag in to help us format that data sub call. It's under Bezlio, data subs, we can see it. And we don't have an Excel plugin right now since it is a fairly new plugin, but we can use any of these to kind of base it off of. Luckily, though, I do have a cheat sheet snippet in this text file. So this snippet here is actually going to add a data description called veggies using BRDB, using the Excel plugin, and using the method getData. This is very similar to the data sub builder before, just kind of in a text format. So the file name, we give it that path of the file. We have our sheet, which is sheet 1, and we do say the first row column names. We can verify, save, and close. Actually, I'm going to name this just a test so I can save the bezel just in case. And on this button click here, there is a text option. I'm just going to write get veggies. We can preview, and we can actually click this button. Oh, let me go back and actually have a display of that value here. So we can copy this raw data view here and change this data subname to veggies like we set it in the code previously. So when we preview here, it originally will be blank until we hit that get veggies, let it come back, and it'll actually pull in an array of objects. So really this is the simple exercises in the custom builder. We can get a lot more advanced, and I can show you a few more techniques here. Now, I'm going to rename this data sub fruit just for convenience here. So our next step here is, say you want to have a better way of displaying these data structures or these data subs. We can come into our snippets here. It's kind of hard to see with this zoom. Come up to the markup, and we have a table folder here. A simple hover table will be able to display these data subs pretty effectively. So when we drag and drop that hover table in, it kind of gives us a couple different parts of this HTML. We have a head and we have a body. And the main part of this table here is this ng4. Now, this ng4 is an Angular component, and this kind of lets us loop through an array to populate this data table. First, we can name some of these table heads. Type, color, and price. Kind of similar to the object itself. So for our table body here, we're going to actually loop through our fruit data description, which we can drag and drop into this ng4 and name. And here are those brackets again. So it's going to interpret this data. And an object's property can be referenced using that item, a dot, and then that property name. So here, we actually let each item of that bezel data fruit be called items in this table. So here, we can go type, color, and then price, very similar to the table headers. You can save and preview that. And once that data comes in, it's actually, I need capitals. So once that data comes in, it's actually going to populate that hover table. So now, let's say we want both the fruits and veggies to be displayed in this table here. Now, there's a bunch of different ways we can have this done, and the reason I'm picking the one I'm doing today is to kind of explain about parameters and functions. So, first here, since we're not really going to need this button to call the veggies data anymore, we can get rid of that and rename that function. Rename that function get veggies. Now we can call that function on ng on init, so it comes in just like how the fruit data description comes in. We can verify and save that. So now on data change, really the loading just depends on this bezel.data.fruit. We can make a simple edit here and make it depend on both data descriptions. To test that out, we can just preview, make sure they both come back before the loading animation is done, which they did. Now the next step here is to decide which data gets populated into the table. Now we have, like I said before, a bunch of different ways to do this. One way we can do this is using a drop-down button. Now this button is going to have a list of different options for us. And here is our list, and each option calls the same function, but actually provides a parameter. Now, a parameter is something you would pass into a function to help the function execute. So here, we can keep them 1 and 2. We can get rid of that third option since we only have 2 data subscriptions right now. And for these values here, we can just change it for fruit and veggies, just to give the user an option to choose which one is displayed within the table. We can save this, and we can go to this function, this on button click here. Now, if we go into our snippets here, we do have, in our code snippets, we do have a switch statement. A switch statement will evaluate an expression and choose which one matches that expression, which code block. So since we are passing in a couple numbers here, we can actually drag this param, which is our parameter, which is being passed into the function, into that switch statement to evaluate. Our first case will be the string 1, and our second case will be the second, or string 2. Now, save and close that real quick. I did forget to add a variable that would be displayed here. So right now, we have this table actually just displaying our fruit variable. For this to kind of work where it has the ability to switch between 2 data subs, we'll need a third variable to kind of hold what is currently in the data table. To add a variable, just add a simple new one, and we can rename that view data. Now this view data will come in as a basic string, but we will make it an empty array just to help things. Yeah. So instead of the bezel the bezel data fruit here, we can drag in our new variable. And right now, it's just going to display nothing since it is empty. However, on our button click here, the same one with the switch statement, in our cases, we are going to choose which data description is used. To do this, we can drag in our view data variable and assign it to whatever value the user selects. So for one, I believe it was the fruit data description. And then for case 2, we can copy that and make it our veggies data description. So we should be able to preview this and select which one gets viewed in the table. We don't really need these raw data views anymore, since the table will kind of be our viewer. So once the loading animation is done, we can select which one we want to view, and the table will be populated with that data. Now, obviously, this is nothing like Curve. Curve is definitely a little bit more advanced, but this is the basics of every bezel building exercise here. From here, like I said before, the sky's the limit, and any JavaScript, HTML, jQuery, it's usable in these editors. When we're developing and maintaining bezels, we're actually going through this custom designer and making changes ourselves. So we use it on our end, and our users use it. So we have a bunch of snippets here to kind of help people develop bezels. And I mean, that is our goal, is to have our users develop bezels, share their ideas with the community, and get everyone involved. So these snippets, we're constantly adding new ones. And you know, if you guys see a snippet that you want to see in that folder structure, just shoot us an email, and it's not that hard to add it into our builder, and it'll definitely help out other users and other developers. So I can kind of go through here and talk about each snippet. I know some of these are very simple, some of them are very advanced, but they are all used within. And I know previously there was a couple mentions of using like a router and stuff like that to kind of switch panels, and those are available in these snippets. So for our markup is really just our HTML snippets, which is the UI or what the bezel looks like. We have some Angular snippets, really just like some ng-force and ng-if to help kind of get your data distributed within the HTML. Something very similar to what we did here with this hover table. We have badges. We use these a little bit in some of our own bezels, kind of to display information a little bit more positively or with warning or danger. I can kind of show you it here. So our labels really they are just text boxes with just like they're highlighted in different colors. Now these can be useful to just display different information depending on selections or user input. And we have a whole list of them here. We kind of went through the two buttons we have on our list. We have a drop down and a standard. We have charts. So these charts are they are kind of similar to our templates, but these will require a little bit more customization and a little bit more knowledge to use them. But it will actually tell you how to use them using your data. So if we pull in a bar chart here, it will actually include a bunch of comments, and it will actually tell you how how to organize your data and where to organize your data in. Because really, this is just a one-line HTML, and most of this is just copying and pasting these various snippets into other functions and other variables. We have input markups. We have like a text input, a type ahead, a combo box. Let's see if we can show a combo box here. So a combo box will actually take a list of items and display them in almost like a drop-down menu. Now, it actually populates a variable called combo box items. Let's see if this will work here. And we can actually just make them an array of strings for now. So this is our combo box. It's really just a long, or it's an input that gives the user a list of items that they're only allowed to use. So instead of having a free-form text input, we can use a combo box to limit searches or limit user input. And I know Kurt has used plenty of these in some of his. So we have a whole list of markups down here. Kind of, they don't fit into any of these basic folder categories. We've used a few of them, that raw data view, that loading. There's a calendar. I know Adam briefly, I think it was Adam that briefly showed you the calendar. Now all these will require you to organize your data some way. Well, not all of them, like the calendar. But it does give you some comments to help you out here and to kind of get you started. The thing with these snippets is these snippets never are a complete Bezlio. You kind of have to add your swing on them and add your ideas to them, but the snippets will help you get to where you want to go. The custom builder, you can really do anything with, and the snippets are just there to kind of help you and to guide you at first. But you do find yourself kind of dragging and dropping them when you do need them later on in development. I'll kind of allude to it a little later, but the raw data view is very useful, especially when starting a Bezlio or starting to develop. When you just want to see that data and just to see how it's organized, if you don't know how it's organized before, the raw data view is a great way to kind of get you a visual of that data without actually knowing what that data looks like. So onto the code snippets here. We briefly talked about the data sub ones, and we have some basic ones like ODBC and SQL to kind of help you start it if you don't want to use the data descriptions builder. The data descriptions builder and these snippets, they act the same way and they're viewed the same way in the Bezlio itself. It's just two different ways. If you wanted to add a data description later on in the Bezlio and not have it run at the very beginning or not have it fire at the very beginning, this is a great way to add data descriptions. A big one with our apps is current user. So we have these environmental variables that are associated with your account, and I know some of our apps, like Accounts View, will pull in customers depending on what customers are associated with your email. So that email is actually stored in this bezel environmental, or env variable. And if I'll do a raw data view just to kind of show you that here. We actually have a restriction in our custom builder to not confuse the different code versus markup, to try to prevent users from kind of getting a bunch of errors in their HTML. But I believe it's just. So this will actually just set that value is actually just the email address of that current user. And like I said before, we pass it into a lot of our bezels, and it can be very useful referencing customers or orders or invoices in general. So I know we briefly mentioned about routing to panels and how Kurt had that set up. There is a code snippet here called route to panel. And just to bring it in and kind of show you what it looks like here. And it's very simple. It is one line of code, and all it requires is the name of that panel that you're trying to route to. And that name is whatever name you reference when adding that panel. So if you kind of want to show something where you click a button and it'll bring you to that panel and it'll populate that panel with customer data or account data, kind of like what Kurt did, this is the perfect way to do it very seamlessly. And I know there was some talk about self-updating. I personally haven't used too much of these snippets, but there are 6 different snippets here to kind of self-update the bezel, it looks like. We can insert markup, append to markup, update markup. We can also do that with a variable, a function, and we can add more lines of code to a function. So I know this is very basic to some of you, and this is like a kind of a starting point to kind of get people to develop these bezels. Like Kurt said before, I mean, you can go in there with very little knowledge of JavaScript and HTML and kind of put together something that works for you. And with Slack and with communications to our developers, we're always there to offer help and to offer support. So if you get stuck on something, just email us or put something in Slack, and we're always there to help get you going. This is really just the beginning of our custom builder. We're always adding new stuff to it. We're always adding new snippets, and this is really one of my favorite parts of Bezlio. We're trying to make a community around these bezels, and a community where users will share these bezels to other users. So it's not just us building apps and build bezels, it's the whole community kind of feeding itself with these apps. And this is where it all starts in this custom builder here. Now, just like any development, there can be errors when you're developing and you're doing these bezels. We do our best to kind of throw notifications at you here and there to kind of warn you or let you know when something's not working. But if you want to throw errors within your development of your bezel, there's a couple ways we can do that. Now, some of you guys are aware, but there is, at least in Chrome, there's a developer's console with a console there. So if you right-click and press inspect, or you can do Control-Shift-I. That will bring up a window here with a couple different options. The best one here would be to use the console. And from here, we can throw in information into this console kind of to display it to you when you're debugging or when you're coding to try to help you out and help you find values, help you find errors. So this is set up in mobile. And also you can click on this and you can toggle the device size to make sure your bezel looks good in mobile or the different sizes you're currently using. But for this console, it's a very simple line of code. We'll just add something small here in ng on init to throw a text or a string in this console just to kind of let you know that we've made it inside that function. So it's just console.log. So now, when this function runs, it'll actually throw that string into that console. Oh, do I have that routing stuff? Yeah. Good call. So in our console, you can see it did throw that string. And honestly, the best part about this console isn't that it throws strings or numbers or that. You can throw objects. And when you throw an object, you can actually get into that object in a more advanced way than just viewing the text of that object. So I'll throw one of these simple data objects in there, and I'll show you what I mean. So instead of that string, you can just do a bezel.data.fruit. Save and close that. And preview. Oh. Maybe I had that wrong. I gotcha. Yeah. So, good call. We'll actually include that in our on data change to make sure that we actually get data back before we do throw that. So I'll expand this console to help show it. But so here is our object. It looks very basic here, just 3 objects in an array format. But if we click on this arrow, we can actually dive into that array and dive into each object itself. So it definitely helps the debugging process and the coding process just to see how that object is organized. And it's just one more way to see that data that you're not really sure of. Now we do have notifications in Bezlio. As you can see, the various warnings and errors that I have been throwing. But those are a great way to help the debugging process, or even just to throw errors in your bezel. So say if you want 5 inputs from a user, but they only give you 4, you can have a check there. And if there's not 5 inputs, throw the error, give the user a warning, and gives them a chance to fix their input before submitting. Now, we have those included here in our code snippets. And we can just add a simple one here on ng on init. We can have there's a critical, an error, an info, success. We'll just add a success. It'll kind of give you the option to throw a parameter as well. Really, you can just throw a message. And when that function runs, it will throw that notification. Now, the success, I believe all of the notifications except for the critical error will actually disappear after a short time period, but the critical error will actually stay up there to let the user know that there's something important that they need to take care of. So I know there was a lot kind of thrown at you, and I know some of it was very basic, but like I said before, the custom builder is kind of the first stepping stone into building your own apps and bezels, and it can be a very great tool if you do want to do some development. It's where I start every time I work on a new app or a new bezel. It's where I start when there's problems in old apps and bezels and I have to go and debug them. I know tomorrow we do have a way to pull in third-party libraries, and Anya will go over that a little bit more tomorrow and kind of show how to debug that process as well.